Welcome to the Kingdom Creatives Podcast. I'm Flavia Beswick Malcolm, your host and number one fan on this wild ride of faith-infused creativity. Our goal? To provide that extra push you need through a symphony of tips, interviews, and nuggets of inspiration. So whether you're a seasoned artist or a newbie, whether you wield a paintbrush, pen, or instrument, let's make a thing of beauty together on this amazing God-given canvas called life. Remember to follow or subscribe to us wherever you stream your podcast to get your weekly dose of sunshine. Feel free to leave us a comment or voice message as well. We'd love to hear from you. This is the Kingdom Creatives Podcast, where faith meets artistry. Let the adventure begin. So we all know the story of Noah, right? He's placed in a basket, put in the river, and then found by Pharaoh's daughter. He's raised as one of the Egyptians, but then one day, something happens and he has this epiphany. He decides that now he's gonna defend one of the Hebrews. And what happens? That resulted in the death of one of the slave masters, right? So, he decides, well, it's better I run than die. So he goes out in the wilderness and he's there for quite a while until one day he comes across this bush. And it's no ordinary bush. It's burning, but not really. Can you imagine what you would do if you saw that happening? And then, if that's not interesting enough, it starts to talk. I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I know that must have been something incredible to witness. Now, while he's having this conversation with God, who is using, of course, the bush, and it is still burning, but not really, God asks him to go back to Egypt and save his people. Now, imagine you already left under very shady circumstances, and then you had to go back and rescue God's people. And you already feel like you're inadequate. Because he's saying, I don't really talk that well. I'm not much of a public speaker. But he sends him anyways. Like, yeah, but you're the person I want, right? What do you do? And I bring up this story because sometimes we feel that way. Sometimes we feel like we're inadequate. Sometimes we feel like maybe God has made a mistake. Why would you ask me? I'm sure there are other people that are better qualified. Why would you even think of me? Come on now. But God knows what he's doing. Whatever you carry is what he needs to reach a specific person, or it might be what he needs for a specific situation. It doesn't mean that, it's not going to happen still, whether or not you accept it. But it would be good if we did, without the pushback. Now, we also know that Moses had a rod in his hand. That's the same rod that he used the first time he interfaced with Pharaoh. I was going to say Noah. And it was also the same rod that he used when they were crossing the Red Sea. But, initially, he didn't know that the rod could do all of that. But guess what? God knew. And God is saying the same thing for us. We have different gifts. We have different potentials. And God is saying, I can use that for something great. You might not see it, but I see it. I know what you're capable of. So what does God do? God asks him, what is that in your hand? And I'm going to read the scripture. It's Exodus 4, 2-4. It says, And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before it. So the same rod that he had when he cast it on the ground, he was a bit surprised. Maybe that has happened to you before. You've done something and it surpassed anything that you could have imagined. And you got scared. Some of us are afraid of success. But it doesn't end there. The Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. And for me, what this is saying, and you can pull your own meaning from it based on what you're experiencing. But for me, what it is saying is, as long as we're following God's lead, the same thing that is in our hand, the same thing that may have really surprised you and you didn't know how to manage it, you maybe even mishandled it at some point. God can take that and use that in a mighty way that it can part a Red Sea. You know, he's gonna do amazing things, but we have to be obedient. And I'm talking to myself as well. We have to be obedient for these amazing things to happen. And so I hope this is reaching at least one person who's sitting on a talent, who's sitting on a calling that God has placed on your life. And you're saying, God, maybe you could have chosen somebody else. I feel like you could have done better. I'm not the best pick. If you're that person, but you know for sure that God has called you, take up your rod. What's that in your hand? It could be that you're really good at praying. It could be that you're good at encouraging people. It could be that you're good at singing, you're good at graphic designing, you are good at painting. Whatever it is, you might be a great writer or you're great at organizing. You never know what that gift could do if you follow the lead of God. Let's be obedient. Let's use our talents to glorify God. Don't compare yourself with anybody. Your calling is not the same as mine. I saw something where it says, God doesn't need everybody to input on what he has called you to do because it wasn't a conference call. So, your calling is not the same as mine. Do what God needs you to do, be obedient, and use what is in your hand. This was the Kingdom Creatives podcast, where faith meets artistry. Feel free to send us a voice message if you want to ask us a question, if there are topics that you want us to cover, or you just want to shout us out. The link is in the show notes. We want to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in and welcome back. I would say Happy New Year, but it's the year's basically done. I hope you were blessed. I hope you were encouraged. And I really do hope that you do not just listen to this, but you act on it. Use whatever is in your hand. Thanks for tuning in. God bless.